Hey everyone, welcome into the program with Woj, brought to you by Novig. Really excited about today's show. Today's guest, University of Southern California Trojans women's basketball coach, Lindsay Gottlieb, one of the very best at any level. She took Cal to a Final Four before moving on to the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA, and then returning to women's college basketball, where she took a once proud program at USC and made it a national powerhouse again, consecutive Elite Eight appearances, recruiting one of the transcendent players in all of college sports, not just women's basketball, and JuJu Watkins. And right now, USC basketball is a model for how programs are built, for innovation, for unique team building, and they have turned, along with UCLA, they've turned LA into maybe the women's basketball market in this entire country. I've known Lindsay a long time, all the way back to her days when she was leading Cal Santa Barbara to the NCAA tournament. So let's get to it with Lindsay Gottlieb of USC. This episode of the program is presented by Novig, the peer-to-peer sports prediction market with no house, no hidden fees, and the best odds in the game. Whether you're a casual fan or a sharp trader, Novig lets you play smarter, win bigger, and make sports picks in a whole new way. And it's available in over 35 states. Learn more at novig.us/Woj and use code the program for a match up to $100 on your first purchase. Here with Southern California coach Lindsay Gottlieb. Lindsay, how are you?
I'm great, Woj. How are you?
I'm great. I want to start here, Lindsay, where your life, after really just 2 years earlier, making a dramatic change, going from Cal to the NBA with the Cleveland Cavaliers. 2 years later, it's 2021. USC comes after you to be the head coach of a program that was down. And you had a decision to make, I think, not just about leaving the NBA in 2021 in Cleveland, but going back to a very different world of college basketball than maybe you even left in 2019. Take us back to then and how you viewed returning to college, and how the job might look different than it even had been in 24 months earlier at the University of California.
Sure. Well, I probably called you about 50 times in those couple days in between, so you could probably recall what was going through my mind. But, when I went to the NBA, I was very conscious of sort of what I was leaving behind. I knew going to the NBA was an incredible life experience, which it was. But pretty quickly, when I was in that league, I thought, gosh, I'm learning so much. I'm going to want to be a head coach again. I'm going to want to take this knowledge, but I would, and try it kind of Lindsay version 2.0, but I wasn't in any rush. So the USC opportunity came probably quicker than I would have chosen, but the best opportunities don't always come on your timeline. And so for me, I knew what USC could be. I had a kind of front row seat in the former Pac-12 to the inherent things that are great about this place, right? Like a reputation in athletics and academics, a brand, and this history in women's basketball. So I had to figure out if they were going to really invest in women's basketball and be a place that I could, do the things I wanted to do professionally and then also with my family. And once I wrapped my mind around that and I thought, this is the one, right? This is the place we can do those things. Then it became looking at the landscape of where college athletics was going. And I think it has really helped me, to have taken that time in the NBA to be able to come back to college eyes wide open. We didn't know that we'd end up in the Big Ten. Obviously, I couldn't have predicted that. We knew NIL was coming. I don't think anyone could have known exactly where it was going to go and, the transfer portal. But I think coming back with a conscious sort of excitement about leading in this new era was way more helpful, to me than, let's say, sitting in my same seat for 20 years and having to adapt to the change on the fly.
Lindsay, how much, you come back into college basketball in 2021 and, South Carolina is a power and UConn is still a power. How did you look at where USC was located, what it was as a school, what made it unique or could make it unique in this landscape that you could do it maybe a little differently and have a little different model than other power programs in the country?
Yeah, I mean, while those programs are incredible and they've, the ones you mentioned have won multiple national championships, I really didn't think that much about them, right? I thought about what could USC be? And there's only a few programs that you can put your finger on that you feel like, hey, that's a gold mine waiting to happen if we do it right, if things come together, if there's, the right people and the right things in place to do it. And I thought the things that were unique, number one, you mentioned the location. And it's a little bit more than just sunny LA, right? Like that's part of it. But look what was about to happen in LA, right? The Olympics are coming in 2028, the NBA All-Star Game this year, the World Cup. It really felt like it was going to be the epicenter of sports. And quite honestly, what's happened now is it's become a hub of women's basketball, which is really cool. We thought we could tap into the outside world. And then as you add in, this NIL piece, I do think it's more important for college athletes now to be aware of where they are, the surrounding opportunities, the stage that they're going to be on. And that's all kind of come to fruition to make it a more exciting opportunity than it even was before. And still in women's college athletics, a beautiful campus, great academics, and a community feel always matter. Then we're just adding to that these exterior factors as well.
And then you see there is a high school player in your backyard that I think you and your staff immediately believe could fast track USC's return to prominence in college basketball. You didn't have a whole lot to show JuJu Watkins yet. You had a vision of what it could be. But when you think about timing and who the player was and what the marketing opportunities were going to be for this, not only this extremely talented, gifted, charismatic, telegenic player, but it's Los Angeles. And all of a sudden, and women's basketball is really exploding again across the landscape. What did it mean to have JuJu in your backyard and say, okay, we are going to try and build our program around her? And obviously, every program in the country, every serious program in the country is trying to do the same.
Yeah, I'm going to fast forward to last weekend, when USC played Michigan in the Coliseum and there were, 70,000 fans. It was this epic night. And JuJu was the tunnel captain, first ever current student athlete. And she received the Naismith Award in front of this just adoring fan base. And you see her as transcendent from just women's basketball. And I really got goosebumps with that. Obviously, none of us would have chosen for her to be injured right now. But in terms of having been there, 4 years before, when we're talking about this as the vision being, JuJu, you're going to be exceptional wherever you go. But if you come to USC and you build something here and you do it in your hometown of Los Angeles that you care about so much, you could be one of those athletes that is kind of just bigger than your sport. I mean, in recruiting her, it was building that relationship and trying to show that vision. And to her credit, she believed in herself enough, I think, and believed in us enough and was progressive minded enough to see something that hadn't been done. It's much easier as a high level 16, 17-year-old to say, oh, I see the blueprint here. They've gone to Final Fours. It's plug and play. I can see it here. But this young woman had an ability to see this vision. And so now to kind of see it take shape, and we're not exactly everywhere that we want to be, Woj, you know that. There are more goals. But to see what she's become has been a really cool thing to be a part of. And all the credit to her, she's performed on the biggest stages, but the vision that we laid out and that she kind of took hold of, it's really cool to see it come to fruition.
Lindsay, JuJu's second year, as she's a freshman, you recruit, the number one high school class in the country. You bring in big time portal player, and it's you're putting stars with a star. But what was really fascinating to me is what you did in her freshman season. And that was, you've got the commitment from her, and you bring in 3 Ivy League essential grad students who were there for their final year, right? Penn, Columbia, and Harvard. That team goes on and makes the Final 8, gets to the Elite 8 of the NCAA tournament. What was the thinking about in that first year, putting that group of women around JuJu, and what were you hoping the impact of that would be?
Yeah, JuJu and the Nerds. That's what it became, called. And actually, I was thinking about the other day, like it was such a magical kind of experience the way that played out. So the year before that was my second year. We struggled our first year. Culture shift is happening, and so my second year, we really went to the portal and we brought in, I think, 7 portal kids, and that was sort of the island of misfit toys. You go and get the right people, and I'm so grateful for that group because we wanted winners. We wanted people who wanted to get to the NCAA tournament, who wanted another shot. And they did that. And we scraped and clawed our way into the NCAA tournament. But most of them, or a lot of them, were one-year players. So now we knew coming in, we had JuJu coming in, and we had another freshman in that class, Malia Samuels, who's an important part of our program. And we had a couple of returners, namely the front court, that had been with us for a while, Rhea and Clarice. But as we looked to add a few portal pieces, not an overhaul in the portal, we knew what we had with JuJu and we knew what we had with the returners. And so, the unique nature of the COVID year with the Ivy Leagues, where they cannot stay and play there, it was kind of a neat thing where you had these young women who were happy where they were. They were excellent where they were. They got degrees and they had basketball careers, and they were looking for one more year to have, kind of a next level basketball experience. And so I don't know that we thought, hey, let's go get 3 Ivy League people and put them around JuJu, but we knew we wanted veteran. We knew we wanted, so to speak, players who have kind of gotten over themselves, right? Weren't necessarily looking for what they could get, but more what they could give and be a part of. And each conversation in the portal is about, what do you think you can bring and what do we think we can offer, and does that match? And those 3 kids who came here, Kenzie, KP, and KD, just were phenomenal in helping to surround JuJu, to make big plays when needed. You saw us play at the beginning of the year, and then the end, we got a lot better. They made crunch time plays, and also were just a wonderful sounding board as humans and as players for JuJu and Rhea and the young players we had. So it ended up being a really magical thing that I don't know anyone would ever, be able to recreate, because it just happened so organically.
Lindsay, 3 of 4 years on the job, you got commitments from the consensus number 1 player in the country. And so they're all coming to also play with each other, to play with JuJu, who's obviously sitting out this year, and you'll have her back next year. What have you learned about the balance of bringing on star power, but also really good role players who are going to complement them and who are okay with complementing those players? What have you learned about that in the portal? You've been in the portal, you've done it from the high school ranks, and now you're doing it internationally too.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, you and I have had conversations about, professional basketball and what does a GM do, and building a team. And now that's what essentially you and I are both doing in college, right? You're building a team. And I've been on USA basketball committees, and I've never believed that building the best team is about stockpiling the best 13 players you can find, or certainly not the 13 players who are ranked the highest. It's about putting together a championship quality roster amidst a championship culture. And so, you joke about, people say, oh, I must be this great recruiter. It doesn't feel like recruiting. It doesn't feel like a sales pitch. You try to build something that people want to be a part of, and then you figure out who fits with who the targets are. Hey, if we get this player, that means we can bring in these other 2 players that fit, and roster construction happens more that way. I remember when I first got the job here, we were early in it. I don't think we even had JuJu yet. Was visiting my family in Brooklyn, and we were at the Prospect Park Zoo, and I got a phone call from Jazzy Davidson, because at that time, young players have to call you can't call them. And I remember getting on the phone with her, and I knew how good she was, and we had a great conversation. And when we got off the phone, I said, gosh, I hope we can get to this program to where she'll really consider us. And 3 years later, we're in the top, probably some schools that she'd consider early warrant, right? Or with some other players, you go and say, that's the one we really want. And then maybe their ranking skyrockets, but it's less recruiting and more showing them where they fit. Do what you is what you're looking for something that we have here, we feel like we can do together. And I do think excellence attracts excellence. Really great players want to play with one another as long as they see the vision of where it fits. We're trying to do a lot of pro style sets and a lot of interchangeable positions. And then there's a lot of really good players we pass on because they don't fit. But we think the ones that do kind of fit with various players who fit in a role, and everybody then can achieve their goals, whether that's on the court or their off the court goals as well.
For you, when you say a player doesn't fit, let's assume they're talented, athletically they're there, skill-wise they're there. What is it for you and where your program is and what your values are where you just say that's a non-negotiable for us? She's off my list.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are those things, right? Like if a player just doesn't look like they would benefit your locker room or be someone you want to be around every day. As you know, we're together essentially 365 days a year, even though there's only 30, 35 games, right? So that from a people standpoint, what we're looking for, those that's easy. If someone, red flags there, it's harder when there are really good players who are also good people, but maybe, we have this player and this player, so what they're looking for doesn't fit. Or I'll never lie and say, oh, this point guard that we have, I'm going to play her at the 4 so that you can be the point guard. I'm not going to tell untruths just to get someone on board. Sometimes, whatever their skill sets are, whatever their superpower wouldn't be able to be, used here because of who else we have, then maybe it's a better fit elsewhere. And I think authenticity, I think building those relationships and what you have to offer and what you're trying to build, if that doesn't match with what someone else can do, that's okay. And you just kind of make those decisions or it becomes clear to that player, hey, that's not my fit. And I think that's the best way to do it. I certainly don't have, a secret sauce on it, but we try to get it right based on the way that we want to play and what players are looking for and what style they want to play in.
What struck me, Lindsay, in your 2 years with the Cavaliers in the NBA, and there were some, really good young players. There were veteran players. You would work closely with a Colin Sexton and then also with a Kevin Love and a Tristan Thompson, guys at different points in their career. And I think you learned very quickly, players don't care whether you're tall or short, black or white, male or female. Can you help me get better? Can I trust you? Do you work hard? In my experience, that's what players care about. Doesn't matter if you played in the NBA or you didn't. It's, are you authentic? And I think you hit in every area with people with that. And I think you commanded the respect of players in the NBA, which is not easy. And not every coach is able to do that in the league. How much for you did that experience in the locker room, getting to know the best players in the world, getting to see what the locker room dynamic was financially? Because now you go back to a world in college where even if the players aren't talking to each other about who makes what, their families are sometimes, their agent is sometimes, and sometimes the jealousy and some of that stuff or the friction, it comes from the people around them at different times. How much, when you kind of go day in and day out in USC, do you think back and go, those 2 years in the NBA impacted my ability to coach in this era at maybe even a higher level than you were before you left college?
I mean, Woj, I think about it every single day, every day. So it was a life-changing experience in so many ways. We could do a whole other conversation just on that. And, the way that as a human being, that kind of life experience was unbelievable. But from a basketball standpoint, I think about it often for those reasons that you said. Number one, right, what elite players care about is very similar across men and women. They want to know, do you know what you're talking about? And do you care about me as a human? And do you know your stuff? Can you help me get better, right? And so I think being around those elite players has helped me in the fact that I'm around the most elite players now in women's college basketball. So that's helped. I think from an X's and O's standpoint, and the way I see the floor and the spacing and interchangeable parts, and I do think women's basketball is getting more to men's pro basketball with less of a back to the basket, post game, and more, bigs who can stretch it. And so I think about that all the time. But to your point about being able to be in the business of a sport and being comfortable with that and not shying away from the fact that, one guy's the max guy and one guy's the vet minimum and one guy's a rookie and one guy's trying to get to a contract, just being comfortable with that. Now that we're in this world, what weren't foreign terms to me. A salary cap wasn't a crazy new idea. And at the same time, I also was in that league where you see, even though there's, $30 million attached to this guy and $10 million to another, there's also a real relevance to doubling down on your core values and how you treat people and what makes people happy and what makes them successful. And so I think those are the things in my everyday life. Now we have a GM and we have a salary cap and people have outside business interests, and we're very comfortable trying to win in that era and do things creatively. But I think it also makes me more able to recognize that probably more than ever, we have to build the relationships with individuals and know what drives them and know what motivates them. And I think my time in the NBA is something I lean on all the time in terms of how to best navigate what we're doing now.
Just like a coach looks for every edge on game day, Novig gives fans the edge when they make their sports predictions. With no house and no hidden fees, Novig delivers the best odds every time. It's the smarter way to back your instincts. Learn more about Novig, America's #1 sports prediction market at novig.us/Woj and use code The Program for a match up to $100 on your first purchase. Lindsay, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I find myself in just conversations with other GMs and coaches, men's, women's, basketball, football. I think the relationship and dynamic of the college head coach and the GM I think it's unique at lots of different places. In the NBA or the NFL, it's kind of uniform. The jobs aren't a whole lot different. But being the general manager at St. Bonaventure with our men's program versus being the general manager of your program, the roles I think can be very different. I go out and recruit. I'm making initial contact with a recruit. I'm talking with the agents, raising money, negotiating deals, spending time with our players on what's happening. At USC, maybe with a bigger staff, with the outside NIL and the marketing and how much you have to spend your time on. Our money is mostly building it out through rev share, raising the money. You've got to get outside that $20 million salary cap with NIL. What's been the dynamic? You've had two GMs in a short time, a relatively short time, the last couple of years. But what's been the dynamic as you sort of sort out what your role is, what her role is, and how you figured out the best way to use that position for where your program's at now?
Yeah, I think you make a good point that in college there's different needs across the board. And even we've evolved from one year to the next, both really good people that we've had, but different skill sets. So Selena on our staff, Castillo, our GM, probably does very much of what you mentioned, except she doesn't go out recruiting, but she is very much a part of our basketball ecosystem. Because I don't think you can then be the point of contact with agents and parents and NIL stuff and everything they're doing unless you understand kind of everything that goes into the recruiting process and what these young people's goals are and all of that. But I would add, it's interesting, Selena's a touch point to everything external, but really has her hands on the players and the internal as well. But in this market, and we have so many players who have a robust NIL stuff outside. There's also a lot of stuff incoming because of our platforms here, and that helps the roster across the board, right? In various ways. But Selena is also just as on top of, the player that wants an internship. And hey, let's help that player get an internship. And maybe it's not an NIL deal that brings money, but it's how do we help them achieve their off-court goals? So she's involved in, helping manage the revenue sharing cap, in working with families or agents on whatever goals there might be, on alumni relations and donor relations and all of the external things. And so it's constantly evolving, but it's really in partnership with me and the coaching staff in every way, which is kind of a neat thing to see it evolve. And it's really all in service of the student athletes and having them have this incredible experience here, but also navigate all the new stuff that's coming at everybody.
Lindsay, this was a lot of fun. These are conversations we have pretty often. It was fun to do it on camera with you again and on audio with you again. And I know we'll catch up soon. Good luck tipping it off this season, Linz.
Thanks so much. You too. I'm a big Bonnie's men basketball fan, so watching all your games when I can.
Good. We need you. Thanks,
Yeah,
Lindsay.
thanks. All right, bye-bye.
Thanks to USC Trojans basketball coach Lindsay Gottlieb for joining the program with Woj, brought to you by Novig. We'll catch you next time.